The gallery buzzed with energy, champagne glasses clinked, soft jazz hummed through hidden speakers, and the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume filled the air. Beneath chandeliers and canvas, the city's elite wandered with curated indifference, murmuring over price tags that had more zeros than they could count aloud without shame. And then she walked in. Her coat was worn. Not fashionably distressed, actually worn. Her boots bore city dust, her scarf mismatched, and her hair, though clean, was simply tied back. No designer logo, no glittering clutch, no photographer trailing behind. Just a quiet woman stepping into a space where appearances said more than invitations. A few guests paused, not out of curiosity, but confusion. Did she wander in off the street? One woman whispered to her friend, smirking behind a crystal flute of Prosecco. I think she's lost, another added, nudging her husband. That, or someone forgot to check the door. She didn't argue, she didn't explain. She simply walked from piece to piece, studying each painting with eyes that weren't calculating status, but feeling something deeper. Emotion, memory, story. And that made people uncomfortable. She's staring too long at that piece, muttered a gallery rep under her breath. She's drawing attention. A security guard was motioned discreetly toward her, not aggressive, just watchful, ready to escort, not protect. But the woman, still silent, still slow, paused in front of the centerpiece of the room, a massive, abstract canvas with violent colors and aching lines. And she smiled, just a little. It was the smile of someone who understood it, felt it, maybe even lived it. They called her homeless. They called her lost. They had no idea she was about to become the name behind the biggest sale their gallery had ever seen. The murmurs grew louder as the woman lingered near the painting. More whispers, more raised eyebrows, more assumptions disguised as concern. A gallery assistant, young and overly eager to prove herself, approached her with a forced smile stretched too tightly across her face. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said in that polite tone that people use when they are sure they are speaking to someone beneath them. "This is a private showing. Do you have an invitation?" The woman turned slowly, her expression calm, unfazed. "I wasn't aware I needed one to look at art." The assistant chuckled nervously, glancing toward the security guard who had now stepped a bit closer. "It's not that," she said. "It's just, this is a curated event, by invitation only." Around them, guests began to take notice. A woman in a beaded gown whispered, "Is she arguing?" while another man quietly took a photo, no doubt planning to share it in some private group chat. "I understand," the woman said gently, then added with quiet emphasis, "I'll leave when I'm done." The rep herself now joined the conversation, heels clicking across the floor. "Madam, we truly must ask you to leave. This exhibit is reserved for patrons and collectors. It's not a public gallery." The woman looked at her for a long moment. "You're right," she said simply, stepping away from the painting. "I suppose I'll wait outside until my husband arrives." The rep raised an eyebrow. "And he is—" But the woman didn't answer. She just walked slowly to the entrance where soft rain was starting to fall on the city streets. She didn't pull out an umbrella. She didn't seem bothered. She just stood waiting, still invisible to the crowd, still unforgettable to the art. Inside, the conversation picked up again. Laughter returned. Someone muttered, "Honestly, where do these people even come from?" No one saw the black car pull up at the curb. No one noticed the driver step out and open the door. But everyone turned when the man stepped inside, tall, composed, dressed in tailored simplicity that somehow made every expensive suit in the room look loud and cheap. And everyone knew his name, because he wasn't just a collector. He owned half the city's skyline. And his first question wasn't about the art. "Where's my wife?" he asked. The moment the words left his mouth, "Where's my wife?" the air inside the gallery shifted like a dropped glass shattering on marble. Heads turned, breaths caught, and eyes darted toward the entrance where the mysterious woman had just been escorted out. The gallery rep, pale now, managed a shaky smile. Your wife, sir," she stammered, her voice suddenly thin. He didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. Instead, he turned and walked straight back toward the entrance where she stood patiently beneath the soft drizzle, her coat slightly damp, but her poise untouched. The guard had already stepped away from her, having quickly connected the dots the moment the black car arrived. When he reached her, the man took off his jacket and placed it gently over her shoulders, brushing a raindrop from her cheek, as if the entire world wasn't watching. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said softly. "Traffic." She smiled faintly. "They asked me to leave." His expression darkened, not with rage, but with disappointment. A heavier emotion, the kind that made powerful men move mountains without ever raising their voice. He took her hand and led her back inside, through the same door she had been shown out of moments earlier. This time, no one stopped her. No one even blinked. It was as if the room had frozen, afraid to make another mistake in front of someone with the power to end their careers, or worse, their reputations. As they reached the center of the room, he turned to the gallery director. "I'd like to make an offer," he said calmly, "for everything." There was a pause. "Everything?" the director echoed. He nodded. "Every painting in this exhibit, every sculpture, every piece of art on these walls. My wife wants a collection, and I believe she's earned one." The crowd didn't dare speak. Some jaws dropped, others looked away, ashamed. And then, with a smile that barely touched his lips, he added, "Oh, and please make sure the woman who asked her to leave is the one who wraps each piece by hand. I want her to remember what class looks like." No one laughed. Because no one was mocking her anymore. Not when the most powerful man in the room had just shown who held the real value. The hours that followed became legend among the gallery staff, stories whispered over closing shifts and staff meetings for years to come. As assistants scrambled to calculate the value of the entire exhibit, the billionaire and his wife strolled quietly through the space, hand in hand. No entourage, no fanfare, just the two of them pausing at each piece like they were walking through a memory only they understood. She didn't gloat. She didn't even look at the people who had whispered and laughed earlier. That in itself made her power undeniable. Every painting she stopped at, her husband marked for private collection. Every sculpture she paused in front of, he added to the list, no questions asked. The curator, who had spent years trying to woo collectors for single pieces, now stood off to the side, speechless, her carefully rehearsed sales pitch completely unnecessary. In the corner of the room, the young assistant who had first approached the woman with suspicion now stood rigid behind the reception desk, her face pale. She watched as the very woman she'd tried to remove walked with the ease and grace of someone who had never needed permission to be here. At one point, the woman paused in front of a large painting that had been priced at nearly $1 million, an abstract swirl of grief and color. "This one," she said, not looking at her husband. "It feels like what silence looks like." He glanced at it, then back at her. "Then it belongs in our hallway." Later, while paperwork was being signed and ownership transferred in full, the woman stepped out onto the gallery's back terrace, away from the noise. Rain still drizzled lightly. She closed her eyes, listening to it. One of the interns followed, carrying a glass of water. "Excuse me," he said nervously. I saw what happened earlier. The way they treated you before they knew who you were." She turned to him gently. "And then how you didn't even say anything when it changed." The woman smiled, soft but steady. "People say a lot when they think no one important is listening." He hesitated, then asked, "And now that they know who you are?" She took the glass, held it carefully, and looked out over the terrace. "Now I let the silence answer for me." And in that moment it became clear. She didn't need to prove her worth. The world had simply taken too long to recognize it. By the following week, the story had spread like wildfire, not just across the local art scene, but throughout elite social circles and beyond. Blogs speculated about the mysterious woman with the billion-dollar husband. News outlets ran headlines like, "Billionaire buys out entire gallery after wife is insulted," and "Silent power move stuns art world." But for the woman at the center of it all, none of that mattered. What mattered was how quietly everything changed. The gallery issued a formal apology, not publicly, of course, but in a neatly folded letter delivered by courier, along with a gift of exclusive membership and future invitations. She read it once and placed it in a drawer without response. The assistant who had once questioned her was demoted to back-of-house curation, and the curator began her next exhibit with a new mantra in training: treat every guest as if they might own the building. Meanwhile, inside their penthouse, each piece of art found its place, not displayed for others to admire, but chosen carefully to match corners of the home that had meaning. The painting of Silence now hung at the top of their staircase, lit gently by morning sun. The sculpture she once stood in awe of sat quietly by the piano she played at night. Her husband, ever busy with boardrooms and deals, never mentioned the gallery again. But every evening he'd pour her tea and ask, "Did you discover anything new in the colors today?" Because for him, the real luxury wasn't in the money, it was in how she saw the world. One night, as they sat in the living room surrounded by art that had once been guarded by velvet ropes and sharp glances, he handed her an envelope. She opened it to find an invitation, this time not from a gallery but from a museum. It requested to feature her personal collection in a special exhibit titled "The Eye That Changed the Room." She looked up at him, eyebrows raised. He just smiled and said, "Seems they finally figured out you weren't just another guest." She didn't need revenge. She had something better. She had changed the entire narrative, without saying a word. The night of the museum exhibit arrived with none of the tension that had once filled the gallery. Instead, it was calm, warm, and reverent. People came not to flaunt, but to feel. And this time, they weren't just attending an event, they were stepping into her story. The exhibit was titled Scene. Just one word: simple, quiet, powerful, like the woman behind it all. Each piece from the original gallery was now mounted with small, handwritten notes beside them. Not signatures, not price tags, just reflections, emotions, thoughts. Some pieces had captions like, "This felt like walking away without slamming the door," or, "This reminded me of being too tired to cry." She didn't give speeches. There was no red carpet, and yet the most powerful names in art, fashion, and finance came, drawn not by gossip, but by grace. The same curator from the gallery attended too, standing at the back, humbler now. She watched as guests read those handwritten notes and lingered in silence before each piece. She watched as they didn't just look, they understood. And in the middle of it all, the woman walked with quiet ease, not holding court, not posing, just present. Toward the end of the evening, a little girl, no more than 10, approached her shyly with a program in hand. "Are you the lady who saw all the colors before anyone else did?" The woman knelt to her level and smiled. "No, sweetheart, I just stopped listening when people told me not to look." The girl nodded thoughtfully, then whispered, "I want to look too." "You should," the woman said, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "Don't wait for permission." As the event wound down, her husband stood near the entrance, greeting those who had traveled across the country just to witness what his wife had quietly built. But he didn't steal the spotlight. He never had to, because tonight wasn't about him. It was about the woman everyone once ignored, laughed at, and labeled. The woman who didn't yell, the woman who didn't fight, the woman who let the world come to her, one quiet masterpiece at a time. And in the heart of that museum, surrounded by brushstrokes and breathless silence, she stood as what she had always been, a living portrait of quiet strength, a reminder that sometimes the loudest statement is made without a sound.